On Halloween night, 1986, Universal Studios Hollywood tried something new. Take the famous daytime backlot tour and make it terrifying after dark. As you roll through the backlot, figures leapt from shadows, mannequins pose as corpses. And a quiet studio turned into a moving haunted maze. The signature bit was simple. Park trams staged like morgues, live actors hidden among the dummies, passing tram full of guests, and a jump scare at the perfect moment. At 9 p.m., the moment went wrong. The actor's name, Paul Rabalde, 20 years old, from Woodland Hills. His assignment that night was to wait on a park tram dressed with mannequins, and then spring out to startle guests as moving trams passed by. Somewhere during that exchange, between the third and fourth sections of a 4-car tram, he was caught, pulled under, and dragged for roughly 100 feet. He would die instantly at the scene. After sheriff's investigations, no one could exactly say how he became trapped. Universal's trams are articulated with multiple linked cars pulled by a tractor, great for the corners of the backlot, but dangerous if a performer misjudges distance in the dark. And at night, the sightlines compress, glare from the work lights, reflections off the fiberglass, and moving shadows. And all these factors turn into variables. In 1986, the show placed actors off the vehicle while guests rode through. A scared time to a moving tram means the actor's margin of error is measured within feet and within seconds. And within 48 hours, the story had a shape. A nighttime tour, a parked prop tram, a volunteer performer, and a death in front of paying guests. And Universal themselves called the incident a tragic accident. But behind the scenes, the effect was instant. Hollywood's Halloween experiment shut down. The studio quietly ended scare actor attacks, moving trams moving forward. Paul Rabalde wasn't a monster. He was just a retail employee who volunteered to perform, to put on a costume, and to climb into a set piece to make strangers scream. But the design of the scare put him in the kill zone. And when he missed the margin by just inches, the tram didn't. If you're anything like me, nights aren't always kind to you. I constantly wake up in the middle of the night and unable to go back to sleep. I usually edit very late into the night, and when I finally lay my head down to sleep, I don't always find it easy to fall asleep. And ever since I started using the Manta Sleep Mask, my problem has finally gone away. It's the first mask I've used that actually feels comfortable. It's fully adjustable and it blocks out 100% of light. The eye cups are actually detachable, so you can place them anywhere on the mask that fit your eyes exactly. And it puts no pressure on your lids or eyelashes. The headband strap is completely adjustable, so it fits any type of head. And the fabric is so premium, you don't want to take it off. And my favorite part about this mask is the sound part. The mask features built-in speakers, and they sit completely flat, and it's perfectly designed for side sleeping. You can run anywhere from music to YouTube videos to even white noise. And if you don't even need the built-in audio, Manta has plenty of other options you could choose from, including more budget-friendly masks that are still just as comfortable, the same 100% blackout, and the same adjustability. And what's great is that there's a version that will fit your needs and your budget. And if you're in a noisy place, they even offer a sleep noise machine that can mask out the bumps in the night, so you stay asleep longer. And if you travel a lot, this is a must. Traveling can be very stressful and very noisy, from planes, hotels, to even the bright mornings. So if sleep matters to you as much as it does to me, check out Manta Sleep. And if you use the code question, you can get 10% off your order. And the links for everything will be down in the description below and in the pinned comment, so it's as easy to find as possible. And again, big thanks to Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video. And now, back to the video. On October 30th, 2015, in a brick wall at the end of the industrial courtyard in Bucharest, a metal band threw a free release party with a low ceiling, black foam on the walls, and a few cold fountains of indoor fireworks to kick off the show. The band was called Goodbye to Gravity. The fireworks weren't dramatic. They were short, bright columns at the back of the stage, and one of them licked the wall. The sound-dampening foam ignited instantly, climbing up the corner like gasoline-soaked fabric. Flames crawled across the ceiling and rained burning debris. People laughed for a second, thinking it was part of the act. And then the lights went out, and the room became heat and screaming. Collective had been carved out for a former factory space, and the decoration that made it sound so good made it also very deadly. The lightweight cheap foam was hyper flammable, and when it burns, it doesn't just produce fire, it produces a thick, toxic smoke that collapses lungs within just minutes. Survivors later described the ceiling turning to a sheet of fire. Some tried for the bar, others for what people kept calling the door, because in the first minute, that's all anyone could ever think about was one way out. And reports that night described just a single usable exit. And in a crush, the geometry of a doorway decides who lives and who doesn't. People piled up at the opening, fell, and became obstacles for everyone else behind them. First responders pulled bodies from the threshold, and the smoke would take many before the flames would. 27 died that night, a number that would keep rising day after day. And days later, the final toll reached up to 64. And on stage, Goodbye to Gravity were hit first. Vlad Sila and Mihai Alexandru died in the fire, and the drummer, Bogdan Inach, lasted a little longer, and then died of complications. And the lead singer survived, but with devastating injuries. The next day, Bucharest woke up furious. In the days after the fire, the city filled with people, tens of thousands of people, not just to mourn, but to accuse. Protesters said Collective wasn't a freak accident, and it was a symptom of permits issued without inspections, safety rules ignored, and bribes replacing the codes. The people demanded resignations of the local mayor who signed off the papers, and the mayor of the district that licensed the club stepped down the same day. And for Romanians, Collective isn't just a date, it's a before and after, a scene that normalized small shortcuts, foam instead of panels, one door instead of multiple, and signatures instead of inspections. It turned into a scandal that reached into every word in every operating room, in a film that made the rest of the world watch. Halloween in Los Angeles isn't quiet. On October 31st, 1979, a 16-year-old named Shirley Lynette Ledford left for a neighborhood party not far from Sunlen Tahanga. She worked that day as a hostess at a local restaurant, handed out candy with friends, and because this was before ride shares and cell phones, she planned to catch a lift or walk the short stretch home. It was close to midnight when a silver GMC van rolled up to the curb. 2 men were inside. They were older, late 30s. One leaned across the passenger seat and asked if she needed a ride. And to Shirley, they didn't look like monsters. They looked like grown-ups willing to save her a walk. So she got in. And the van had a nickname the city didn't know yet: Murd3r Mac. The men were Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris, career drifters who had met in prison, paroled out that same year, and discovered they shared a taste for hunting girls alongside the edges of Los Angeles. In the months before Halloween, 4 teenagers had disappeared after brief encounters with the 2 men in a van. But no one had put the full shape of it together. The interior of the van turned into a room with no doors, and the men did what they had rehearsed: isolate, restrain, and break a person down. They carried pliers, duct tape, a coat hanger, and a cassette recorder, the bleakest detail of all. Because unlike most killers, they documented their cruelty, as if the act was incomplete unless it echoed back to them on tape. Sometime after midnight, as Halloween tipped into November 1st, a car turned onto a quiet residential street in Sunlen and saw something in the headlights, a shape on a lawn where sprinklers should have been. Police found Shirley Ledford there, left in the open, with the intent to be found. Most of their earlier victims had been left in canyons or scrub, where discovery would take days, but this time, the killer staged the ending in suburban light, and it almost looked like a message. The homicide table at Foothill Division had little to start with, just a body, tire impressions, and bruises, in the sense of that whoever did this had done it before, but the city was too big for a single witness to carry the case. And the people who ended up cracking the case word on the street. They were on parole. Norris, impulsive, boastful talked. He bragged to an acquaintance about picking up girls, and about a storage locker in South Bay where they kept souvenirs. And word traveled the way it does with ex-cons trying to impress one another, sideways. But then, detectives listened, pulled threads, and found the locker. And inside were Polaroids of young women whose names the detectives already knew from missing persons binders. In the cassette tape Bittaker had recorded in the van that Halloween night. Bittaker went to trial in 1981. The van, the locker, the Polaroids, the tools, and the tape formed a chain the defense couldn't break. The jury convicted him of 5 counts of first-degree murder, including Shirley's. And he was sentenced to death and sent to San Quentin, where he would live for decades on death row, until he died of natural causes in 2019. Norris, housed separately, died in prison in 2020. And if you go to that neighborhood now, there's no marker. Just an address with hedges trimmed. A porch light that comes on at dusk. Cars angling themselves in the driveways after work. In the case, lives in binders and boxes, and an audio cassette that deserves to never be played again. What remains in public are the sentences on paper. Names, dates, counts in a city's memory of a Halloween where horror wasn't a mask. It was a ride offered by 2 men. Napa Valley sells a certain kind of dream. Vineyards at sunset, quiet streets, nothing to fear but tomorrow's hangover. In 2004, the city hasn't seen a homicide in years. It was the kind of place where Halloween meant porch lights and candy bowls, where danger was just a costume you took off before bed. On October 31st, 3 roommates, Adrienne and Sonia, Leslie Mazzara, and Lauren, handed out candy on Dorset Street and turned in late. Adrienne, 26 years old, was a civil engineer at the Napa Sanitation District. Leslie, also 26, was a former South Carolina beauty queen, reinventing herself in wine country, working hospitality and PR at a local winery. Lauren, the quiet one, had the downstairs bedroom. It was the safest version of California you could pick, until it wasn't. Sometime after midnight, early November 1st, someone slipped into the backyard and came through a kitchen window. Investigators would later say blood on the blinds marked the moment the intruder cut himself. Outside the house, a small scatter of cigarette butts, smoke down to the filter, suggested long hesitation, the kind of nicotine you burn when you're talking yourself into doing something you can't undo. Inside, a staircase turned, and at the top were 2 bedrooms. That's where the killer went. The attack was fast and furious. Savagery, compressed into minutes. Downstairs, Lauren woke to a noise she couldn't place, and then the unmistakable sound of panic from above. She ran and fled the house. She tried calling for help, and when officers arrived, the upstairs rooms were a crime scene. 2 women stabbed to death in the place they should have been the safest. The story that police told the public was careful and thin. They had DNA, the blood on the blinds, and the cigarette saliva from the yard. They had an entry point, and they had the certainty of a knife. But what they didn't have was a name. And for almost a year, Napa Valley was terrified. Women checked their locks twice. Men walked friends to their cars. And the simple question of who would do this and why turned every neighbor into a potential suspect. And then investigators did something simple and devastating. They told the public about the cigarette butts, and that the DNA matched the killer. And it was the kind of detail that only frightens one person the most. 5 days later, 2 parents in Napa opened letters from their son's notes. They confronted him, and they brought him in. His name was Eric Matthew Koppel, 26 years old. He was a land surveyor, well-liked, with no record, and he was engaged to Adrienne's best friend and co-worker, Lily. Koppel sat with the detectives for 5 hours. Prosecutors would later describe a halting narrative. He remembered leaving the house with a knife, remembered smoking outside, remembered crawling through the window. But he never offered a motive that made sense. He said he burned his clothes afterwards in a backyard fire pit, but the DNA made the rest of his story irrelevant. And the circle had closed in a way the city never wanted. The killer was from inside the circle of friends. In October 2005, Koppel was charged with 2 counts of murder. In December 2006, he eventually pled guilty to both murders. And in January 2007, a judge sentenced him to life without the possibility of parole. On Saturday morning, May 26, 1990, a doorbell rang in Wellington, Florida. Inside, Marlene Warren stood up from the breakfast table, and on the other side of the glass was a figure, a clown, orange wig, white makeup, holding balloons. One balloon read, "You're the greatest." The other showed Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. She said, "How pretty." The clown raised a handgun and shot her point blank. He then climbed into his white Chrysler and was gone. Marlene would die 2 days later. Neighbors caught the edges, the wig, the balloons, and the car, and 4 days later, deputies found the white Chrysler abandoned in a Winn-Dixie parking lot. Inside and on evidence pulled from the scene, they logged orange-yellow acrylic fibers, the kind you find in a clown wig, and brown hairs that didn't belong to the victim. And as the shape was forming, there still wasn't a name. Detectives fanned out. A West Palm Beach costume shop owner told police 2 clerks remembered a woman buying a clown suit, wig, makeup, and shoes just the day before the shooting. And in that moment, there was a lead. But the case froze. In the rumor vacuum, people filled their own endings. Marital troubles, a tow lot business, or another woman. And on paper, all you had was a mother shot at her door by a clown with balloons. With evidence that the police could touch but not tie to anyone. And the file itself gathered multiple birthdays, 27 of them exactly. But then the quiet cracked. In 2017, with cold case work and refreshed forensics, a grand jury indicted Sheila Keene Warren for first-degree murder. And the headline wrote itself. The woman, accused of dressing as a clown to kill, later married the victim's husband. She was arrested and extradited to Florida. And the trial everyone expected never even happened. On April 25th, 2023, Keene Warren pled guilty to second-degree murder. And 18 months later, on November 2024, Sheila Keene Warren walked out of prison. A case that began with balloons and a gun ended up with the woman stepping past the chain-link gate, in a sentence that possibly should have lasted even longer. Halloween in Minneapolis is supposed to be easy. Costumes, bars along Hennepin, and a cold walk home through campus. And in 2002, it was also the last night anyone would see Chris Jenkins alive. Chris was 21, a University of Minnesota student, and the goalie on a club lacrosse team. That night, he wore an American Indian-style costume and went downtown with friends. Near closing time, staff put him out of the Lone Tree Bar. He didn't have his jacket, and the temperature was dropping. He walked away into the city and never came back. In the days after, Minneapolis kept its rhythm, morning traffic over the river, students crossing the mall, while Chris's family prepared the city with flyers. 4 months later, February 27th, 2003, someone saw something in the Mississippi River, just upstream from campus. Recovery teams pulled a body from the water. It was Chris. The Minnesota Daily reported that even with the body recovered, the cause and manner of death remained unclear. The autopsy would take weeks, and still might not even close the case. Early official posture leaned away from foul play, accident, or suicide. He was a young man out on Halloween, last seen outside a bar, and ultimately found in a river, and you could hear how the conclusion writes itself. But his parents didn't accept it. They hired a private investigator, called press conferences, and kept pressing police. Where are the facts? And for years, the case sat like that, quiet, until 2006, when investigators did something rare in public. They re-examined the file and reclassified Chris Jenkins' death as a homicide. At a news conference in November, Minneapolis Police Chief Tim Dolan apologized to the family, and a department spokesperson said evidence supported that Chris had been thrown off a bridge. And now, a case once written off as an accident was now an active murder. But Chris's file sits in the overlap, his death ruled a homicide, but yet also cited an umbrella theory that experts often reject. A hay wagon rattled past plywood facades and floodlit scarecrows toward the big set piece, a weathered gallows on a low rise. And it was the kind of scene haunted hayrides were built for. Shadows, breath in the air, and a punchline that you could scream at. And the actor waiting there was Brian Jewell, a 17-year-old high school junior from Toms River. His job was simple: deliver a short speech to the passing wagon, step into a fake news, and give riders a jolt before the tractor rolled on. That night, the tractor rounded the bend to the gallows, and something was wrong. Riders saw a body hanging from the rope, feet still brushing the platform. At first, in the dim light and from the wagon's distance, the stillness read as performance. But it wasn't. When staff finally reached him, Brian was unresponsive, and he had strangled in the noose meant for pretend, and died doing a stunt that he had done before. The attraction operated under the name Haunted Hayride Inc. Staged as an Old West scene, a wooden platform, an upright beam, a rope noose, and a performer who could hang as guests rolled by. And the act had played cleanly on previous runs. You talk, step, and drop, and you scare. But on October 20th, 1990, the choreography collapsed into real physics. There was no hidden safety harness doing the work, and no quick release that guaranteed slack. The rope tightened, and the set stopped being a theater. The wagon watched from the dark, far enough away that a body at partial suspension looked eerily convincing, before it really looked like a real person in trouble. And when you see it from that far back with low lighting, it seems like the actor is just selling it. But with the rope around your neck, the margin of error is measured within seconds. And the earliest signs of distress, of small kicks and shallow movements, are the same motions a good actor would make. And by morning, local papers carried the hard lines. A high school junior, 17, dead in a freak accident. And after the incident, operators who paid attention rewrote their own rules. Neck loads were taken off the table entirely. If anyone insisted on simulating a hanging, it had to be done with a bodyweight harness anchored to the torso. And in the years that followed, many haunts banned hangings outright, unless they were optical force perspective, silhouettes, or animatronics. Not a rope near a real person's airway. And the part that lingers isn't much of the rope, but as the permission Halloween gives us to mistake danger for entertainment. A wagon hears a screech, sees a drop, and applauds, unaware that the sight that they're seeing is truly happening. Brian Jewell didn't die because the scene was too convincing. He died because the scene had no way to fail safely. And it raises a huge question in the first place. If your scare depends on inches of slack around a throat, it isn't even a scare. It's pure risk. And the audience wouldn't know the difference until it's too late. In Seoul, South Korea, Halloween has always been a night of noise, neon, and celebration. But in 2022, it became something else entirely. October 29th, 2022, Itaewon. The first major Halloween after years of pandemic restrictions. No mask, no distancing, just a promise of a night out. Tens of thousands followed the narrow streets, young people in costumes, tourists, and friends meeting for the first time in months. The crowd grew so dense that moving forward or backwards became nearly impossible. By nightfall, an alley barely 3 meters wide became a funnel for hundreds of people. The slope pulled them downward to a wall of bodies. Somewhere in the press, someone stumbled, and then another, and the weight of the crowd folded in on itself. It wasn't a stampede, it was a crush. The air squeezed from their lungs, chests pinned between strangers, panic rising every second. Calls for help were swallowed by the noise. People tried to climb the walls, to pull others out, but the pressure was relentless. When the density reaches more than 8 people per square meter, experts say you're no longer in control of your movement. A single push becomes a chain reaction. When first responders arrived, the scene was chaos. Paramedics performed CPR on sidewalks. Off-duty soldiers and civilians worked side by side, trying to revive the fallen. But it was already too late for many. By the end of the night, at least 153 people were dead. Most in their teens and 20s. 27 of them were foreign nationals. And over 150 more people were injured. In the days after, South Korea demanded answers. The alley had no crowd control measures. Police presence was minimal. And hours before the crush, warnings had been made, calls to police about overcrowding, but no action was ever taken. Investigators concluded it was system negligence. Senior officers and local officers were indicted. Families of the victims gathered for vigils, holding photos and candles where their children had died. And for many, Itaewon is now a ghost in the middle of Seoul, a place where music and laughter were replaced with silence and grief. It wasn't just a tragedy, it was a reminder of how quickly joy can turn into disaster, and how ignoring danger signs can make the difference between celebration and catastrophe. Tokyo, Halloween night, 2021. What should have been a night of costumes, parties, and the chaos of harmless kind turned into something else entirely. A man in a Joker costume boarded a packed train heading for Shibuya, and by the time it stopped, 17 people were injured. Japan's illusion of safety was torn wide open. The man's name was Kyoto Hattori, 24 years old, and by all accounts, he used to be pretty normal, cheerful even. He lived with his mom and sister. He had friends, a girlfriend, but like most stories that end in horror, something broke along the way. After high school, he skipped college and worked at a manga cafe, until they caught him planting a hidden camera in a woman's restroom. And that got him fired. His girlfriend found out and left, and married someone else, and that completely shattered him. He spiraled, job after job, and he struggled to fit in. Eventually, he landed at a call center. It lasted about 3 years. But then in June 2021, he was fired. In his mind, that was it. His final rejection from society. He made a decision. If his life was over, he'd take others with him. He took out a massive loan, traveled between cities, and began buying supplies. A $200 Joker costume, 20 cans of lighter fluid, and a 30-centimeter knife. His plan wasn't just to hurt people. It was to make a scene, to become a symbol. A twisted echo of the Joker on the subway in the 2019 film. October 31st, 2021, he left his hotel in Hachioji and boarded a limited express train around 8 p.m. and calmly took a seat. The train was packed. It was Halloween, people thought his costume was clever. They didn't realize they were sitting beside a man rehearsing murder in his head. He pulled out a can of pesticide and sprayed into the eyes of a 72-year-old man sitting next to him. Then he stabbed him in the chest, without hesitation. Tori stood up, walked to the next car, and began dousing it with lighter fluid. Some passengers still thought it was a prank, until they saw the blood, and until the flames lit up the seats. The train overshot the station platform, blocking doors against the wall. People were trapped, screaming, climbing out windows. Smoke filled the cars. Somewhere in the middle of it all, Tori sat down and lit a cigarette, just waiting. 17 people were injured, and Hattori, smiling in his purple Joker suit, was calmly arrested without resistance. He told the police that he admired Joker, and that he wanted to be executed, that killing 2 or more people meant that he'd qualify for the death penalty. He modeled his attack on another stabbing in Tokyo that had happened just months earlier. The incident sparked panic. For a country known as one of the safest on Earth, this was something new. Something that didn't make sense. Japan rarely experiences random mass violence like this, especially not theatrically staged ones. And yet, the Joker costume turned him into a symbol, whether he earned it or not. Someone who wanted to be feared, because being forgotten was worse. The old man he stabbed survived, and Hattori is still awaiting judgment. The echoes of the night, people climbing out of the train windows in terror, linger in Tokyo. Proof that even in the safest places, something can always crack through.